The ogre who wasn't. A creepy crawly fairy tale with a barefoot princess. Once upon a time, there was an ogre, a very small ogre, who lived in a shoe. He had been found in the palace garden by a princess who was also quite small because she was only 5. She was called Princess Clara. The ogre was hidden away in the long grass under the apple tree down by the pond. He was so small and so well hidden that Clara only saw him just in time. He's hiding there. She brought him back to the palace and hid him in a shoe under her bed. She talked to him, stroked his head, and brought him all he needed. So the little ogre was very happy. He liked living in her shoe. Now, Princess Clara hated wearing shoes. She liked to run barefoot outside, to jump ditches, climb trees right to the top, and stay in the wind. She loved to walk on her hands, turn somersaults and backflips, to run to the top of the hill and watch the larks rising. She liked singing to them when they sang to her, to skip and dance in the fields, to be wild and free, not cooped up inside the palace. Princess Clara hated hats or bonnets, so she went hatless. She didn't care to look pretty or to wear pink or to do her hair. And she loved to collect all sorts of creatures. She hid them in her shoes under the bed. Though not for long, of course. She knew they liked to be outside where they belonged. She looked after them, and they were all friends. But she had never before found a little ogre. He soon became her best friend. She had always wanted a best friend, and now she had one. She wasn't lonely anymore. But Princess Clara was still sad from time to time. She missed her father, who was so busy being king and looking after his kingdom that he was scarcely ever home. They used to have so much fun together. He gave her piggybacks and told her bedtime stories. They went rambling in the countryside and paddling in the streams. But since her mother had died, he was hardly ever there. Now the people in the palace were supposed to look after her, but they didn't. They just told her what to do and what not to do. There was the pernickety nanny who never smiled, who always made her dress up like a princess. She brushed Clara's hair so hard that it hurt and was always telling her off. There was the bossy butler who never liked her running about in the corridors and hated her skipping even more. If he ever saw her skipping, he made her stand in the corner as a punishment. So Clara would escape into the garden whenever she could. The grumpy gardener didn't like her there either. He shouted at her, called her a nuisance child, and told her to go inside. But Princess Clara never did what he said. She just took off her shoes and ran off before he could catch her. With her father away, they all made her life a misery. Sometimes she'd sit down and cry her eyes out, but it wasn't just because everyone in the palace was so horrible to her, nor because her father was away. It was because she missed her mommy. Sometimes at bedtime, she was alone. Clara would take out her shoe from under the bed and tell the ogre all her troubles. I'm so unhappy, she told him one evening. I've lost my mummy. Father is always away and everybody in the palace is pernickety. They just want me to be a proper princess and I'm not going to be. They hate all my little creepy crawly friends. They're frightened, that's what I think. See a mouse, they scream. See a spider, they scream. See a slow worm, they scream. See anything creepy or crawly, and they just run around screeching their silly heads off. Then, for the first time, and to her great surprise, the little ogre spoke. You have been kind to me and looked after me. Become my friend, so I will help you if I can. What is your dearest wish in all the world? To have a mummy and to have a daddy who comes home, Clara told him. I don't want my nanny or the butler or the gardener telling me off all the time. That's a lot of wishes, said the little ogre. But perhaps I can help, you see. I'm not an ogre at all. I'm a toad. In fact, I'm a king toad. Take me back out into the garden where I belong, and I will make your wishes come true. So she did. She crept out of the palace and set him down in the long grass under the apple tree by the pond. He sat there for a moment or two. Then King Toad puffed himself up and croaked again and very loudly too. Out of the pond they came, out from under the lilies and stones they came. Soon there were hundreds of toads and frogs jumping around Princess Clara's feet. Then, following King Toad, off they went through the garden, croaking loudly. Up the steps and into the palace they hopped. Well, it didn't take long. Within minutes, out ran Princess Clara's pernickety nanny, out ran the bossy butler, and off ran the grumpy gardener, yelling and screaming their heads off. They were so frightened they just went on running, out of the palace, out of the garden, over the fields and far away, chased by every toad and frog for miles around. And do you know, they were so frightened they never came back again. So Princess Clara had the palace to herself. Well, not exactly to herself. Soon she opened the doors and it became open house for all the wild things. She loved them all, but her favourite was always King Toad. She was as happy then as she had ever been. But she was about to be even happier. Her father, the king, came home, and to her surprise and delight, with a new wife too. So Princess Clara and her new mother, who was good and kind to her, she and the king were quite happy to live with all their creatures they wanted to come into the palace too. And the king stayed home most of the time. They all went barefoot whenever they could. That was Princess Clara's idea. And they all lived happily ever after with their new creepy crawly family. And with King Toad, who wasn't an ogre at all. The end.